Check it out. Thursdays, 10 a.m. Mountain Time, noon Eastern. A healthy dose of Jersey Girl wisdom. Live with Rev Jersey Girl. Sponsored by New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
Well, good morning, beloveds. I'm so glad that you're here. And today is going to be a different kind of a show, one that is very timely and current with what's happening in our country. And I'm going to take a moment because I have a feeling that we're going to be in a bit of a momentum today in our conversation. And I'll tell you a minute about our guest. And here's what I want to say to you. If you tune into here weekly, if you use this radio station for any purpose of inspiration, support, the music, or even when you're lonely, if you are a spiritual leader of a community, I am asking you once again to do what you can do to support this network, support it. I see you all tuning in more, and the Facebook numbers are going up and you're finding shows. And I see where you are depending upon people in here. So do us a favor. And by the way, we're all volunteers. But do us a favor. Give to this network. Give to this network. And again, I'm saying that now because I have a feeling once my guest comes in this morning, we're going to have a little bit of a flow, and I don't want to necessarily stop that flow. So there was one person, there were a few people, but there was one main person that I wanted to reach out to this week after we experienced the verdict this week of Derek Chauvin. And the fact is, my guest is the Reverend Dr. David Alexander, and he is a passionate, progressive ally, and his work is deep and profound. The reach is far. And so he's the guy I wanted to have here with me today. Folks, you know who he is. Please welcome David Alexander.
Hey.
Good morning, David. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
So, quite the week.
Quite the week. Yeah.
The last time you and I were together, by the way, was the insurrection. And so that was...
Yeah, I was going to say when you were introducing, you were saying today's show is going to be a little different. I thought, okay, I've heard that every time I come on here.
Well, maybe it's different from my other shows, but today is definitely different because I think today, we're not done, but today there was just a little ray of light, a little bit of hope, we're left a little bit like, oh, maybe the work we're doing, maybe some of this work has had impact. And I think that we haven't always had that feeling. That's so right. Tell us about what you're doing, your community, and how you're feeling about what happened this past week.
Yeah, well, let's start with that. I agree with you. It's like it's a small ray of sunshine or hope in the midst of, when you're doing this work. And just to contextualize that, I'll walk through how the verdict came into my awareness. Right, we all probably started the day, and there was the news that they had reached a verdict, and they were going to come back at 4:30 Eastern time. And I had a board meeting that was starting at 5, and I thought to myself, I cannot watch. I cannot get distracted. I would stay away from Facebook, etc. During much of the day, and logged on to my board meeting early and just started chatting with my executive director and just try to keep myself busy. And in the back of my mind, I was preparing for the rest of the evening.
Mm.
I was like, okay, this board meeting is going to go till 7. And then when the board meeting is done, the news will be out. And I was expecting, again, either an acquittal or a hung. My best hope was a hung jury, right? That was my best hope. It's going to be a hung jury. And, then I have to gauge the impact on my family. So my wife will be, upset and emotional and
Do me a favor, just give reference to people who don't know your wife.
yeah. So my wife,
Okay.
I can hold up May issue of Signs of My Magazine.
There
That's my
you go.
wife.
Okay.
And she's from Zambia, and then and her firstborn is 16, and he's about as tall as I am. And so he's 6'2", black male, 16 years old, and so for both of them I thought, okay, my wife will be upset. Many times this has happened over the last few years where I've had to, she'll be up crying through the night about it, not want to go into work, or, just feel unsafe from something that's happened. So I'm preparing my mind. I'm going to have to go upstairs, handle that the best way I know how, gauge how much my 16-year-old has paid attention to it, knows about it, how he feels about it. Teenagers tend to be indifferent about things that we watch on the news and stuff. And yet I know that it, especially as he gets older now and will, eventually have a car and be out there on his own, it has an impact on him. And I have a responsibility to talk about that and do all that dance, all while kind of, entertaining and shielding my 4-year-old from it. Right. While we don't hide anything, we also don't overburden him at 4 years old with drama and stress of it. So anticipating having to do that whole dance through the night as soon as my board meeting was done. And then the verdict came. A board member brought it up. We have several people of color serving on our board at Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta. So one of them brought it up, and we all just stopped. We started crying. I was in genuine shock, absolute shock, and an immediate sense of relief, of gratitude, and just overwhelm. And I thought, oh, I don't have to do all those things I was just talking about doing, and then we all shared our experiences and had a great conversation. And then when I went upstairs, it was like, I sat down, I had dinner, we had a lovely dinner, we put on a movie, and it was just this celebratory, we could just be in each other's presence. And it felt like such a weight lifted. And the reality is there was another incident in Ohio that very day. And we have Dante Wright, which, happened during the trial. And so not off the hook or out of the woods, whatever metaphor we want to use by any means at all. There's still a long way to go. And the fact that we all feel so relieved, what's so interesting, we all feel so relieved that the justice system did what it is supposed to do, but what it rarely does for people of color. Right. And so that is a editorial comment on the system itself, because we all felt so relieved, but the outcome was what the outcome should have been, right? There were eyewitnesses, there was 10 minutes of video, there was police that came forward and said, no, that's not our training. There was a mountain of evidence. We all should have expected a guilty verdict, because
we did not.
But we did not. And that is the part that's like, wow, we have such a long way to go. And so in answering where do we go from here, it's like, well, use of force laws within policies within police departments still has to change. There are still changes within, and there's still an eye to what's going to happen with this case, right? Because we're not at sentencing yet.
Right, correct.
Put in handcuffs and put away, and no bail. So he's, locked up for a couple of weeks, but in 8 weeks or so, we'll be sentencing. And that is where often the justice system continues to, play favorites, if you will. So we'll see what happens with the sentencing. And again, I don't have high expectations that that is going to be as severe as it might be otherwise. We have a case where it was a African American officer who shot somebody, accidentally, and then there was another case where a white female officer had done the same thing. All of this within the last year, and the African American officer got a much more severe punishment. So we'll see what happens with that. But that was my reaction, was a genuine sense of relief. I had somebody else ask me, like, does it change things, for you and your son? And I said, no, it doesn't, because what it told me, while I had a sense of relief, it really didn't change much, because what it told me was that in order to get quote unquote justice, or what was really, I don't like to use the word justice in this case. Justice would be that George Floyd would have been arrested for attempting to use a $20 bill, would have been hauled into jail and
slapped on the wrist.
For that would have been justice, right?
Right.
Justice would have been, Chauvinot would have realized, hey, I've got him handcuffed, I've got him on the ground, I've got 3 other officers here, let me roll him over, let me sit him up, let me get him in the car, there's people watching. That would have been justice. Right. But what we saw yesterday was accountability for his actions, and that's good. That's good, but it wasn't justice. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, my family doesn't have the complexion your family has, but I too, even with my family, I sat there and tears rolling down my eyes. And I definitely had congregants that were on the edge of their seat and called one of my precious congregants, and I knew she'd be in tears. And we just sat on the phone and cried together. We just cried together. And I want to just jump in here. So for any of you who are white allies, this is a glimmer of hope, but we're not done. And I'm going to say that a couple of times throughout our time together. We're not done. And if you're just tuning in, this is the Reverend Dr. David Alexander, and we are chatting about the reactions to the verdict that we just witnessed 2 days ago. 2 days ago. Yeah, 2 days ago. Yeah.
2 days ago. And so, I had somebody ask me, does it change anything with, in terms of how you engage, with your children, particularly with my 16-year-old? And I thought, no, it doesn't change anything, because what happened, what it showed me was that in order to get, again, quote unquote, justice or accountability out of the system, you need 10 minutes of uninterrupted single shot video. You need, several eyewitnesses on the sidewalk. You need officers from the same system of the oppressing officer to come forward and speak out. That rarely happens, right? In other words, you need this mountain of stuff, and then with that overwhelming mountain of stuff, you might get justice, you might get accountability. And that reality is very present. You look at Lieutenant Navarro, I don't remember exactly how to say his last name, but the lieutenant who was stopped, when the lights started going off behind him, he had the presence of mind to say, I need to get to a place where I'm not alone. Right? I'm not going to pull over on the side of the dark road. And so he drove to a gas station, a very well lit gas station, right? Cover and lots of lights, very bright. And he knew there would be other cameras, and he knew that there would be other people. And still, he was harassed. And there was another incident of a young black man who, again, lights going off, and he had done something wrong, made an illegal turn or whatever it was. And he drove all the way home, parked in front of his mother's house so that she would come out. And she did. She came out, and she stood between the officer and her son and said, you got to go through me first. Right. That's the reality, right? So I can tell my son, be careful, have your hands on the wheel, don't do this, don't do, I can say all those things, but the truth is, it's not enough. You know,
Right, right.
I have to say, if you're going to pull over, go where there's other witnesses, go to a public place, drive into a gas station where there's all of this stuff. And it's crazy. It's crazy that I have to say that as a parent.
You're not the only colleague and friend that I have that has a 16-year-old son of color. And I know I feel as the maternal being, and I am very maternal in my nature, and having grandchildren, to me, I'm aware of your son.
Mm-hmm.
Like I follow you enough to know that I hold him on my prayer radar.
Mm-hmm.
I hold my colleague, Reverend Joel's son, Rafi, that we've watched grow. And I know, oh, okay, he's at that age.
Yeah.
And I know that Reverend Joel shared that when at the point that he could get a permit, he didn't want a permit. He didn't want a permit. So I hold him on my prayer radar. So what's happening here is we are beginning to demonstrate the necessity for the community to embrace the sons and daughters of our people that we know of color, because we can't turn a blind eye.
Right.
And I mean, obviously, one of the things, yes, a circle of love, and one of the things about George, and I'm so sorry he's not here, and I'm so glad it wasn't in vain. But the global rise, that was the other very unique thing. The global attention, which is just a sign that the globe has had enough.
Yeah. It was the live recording and posting of that created a public witness to a systemic issue. And we watched, and we as much as there's been some public or footage, whether it's been body cam footage or other footage of other incidences, rarely have we seen over 9 minutes. And to see the actual moment, I remember watching it, and I thought, I was absolutely horrified. It was like, oh my God, he just took his last breath. I just witnessed that, and that incredibly rare that we, and so that I said it at the time. I said, this just may be, when I saw not just the uprising within our own communities and here across the nation, but we saw it around the globe. I thought this one might be different. This just might be.
Right.
What I called it then, it was the Edmund Pettus Bridge moment of our generation.
Right.
Which was that moment that the television cameras turned on what was happening on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. People were horrified, and in particular, white people were in northern states were saying these people are running across the bridge and they're getting chased with police on horseback and they're getting beaten in there, and they watched it live and they were horrified to the point of this is not okay. Right? It was a watershed moment that changed everything, and I prayed fervently when that footage of George Floyd made it around the globe that it would have that impact, and it seemed that it would. And the test was, well, we'll see. We'll see how long before our attention is taken elsewhere, and if the energy dies out. But I think the verdict this week demonstrates that it still can be that moment for us, and now. So the first part is global witness, right? We have to have a global witness to what's happening. And the second part is then the courage to create collective change, systemic change, right? At the Edmund Pettus Bridge moment led to real, substantive, systemic change. Just be a hot flash moment of emotionality. It has to lead somewhere. So it seems like that is still the case, that this may be that for our generation, and that my son William, just like I read, right? I wasn't there, I wasn't alive yet, but I read about John Lewis and the Edmund Pettus Bridge, moment of history. And my son, my 4-year-old William, will read about this George Floyd moment and how it changed.
But I wonder where he'll read it.
Well,
because I got to tell you, and I wrote a blog the other day, when will be the time we finally put out some history books that are that are reporting the true picture and the complexion of this country, and not the whitewashed version, not the whitewashed version. And I want to actually just recommend a movie, a little series that Will Smith is. Uh, I don't know what part of it he is. The movie's called Amend. I believe you can see it for free on Prime, and it's about the 14th Amendment.
Mhm.
And it is a very brilliant moment by moment history lesson in the impact of that 14th Amendment on the whole on our country. So I just want to recommend that, because one of the things, and I want you to get into right, in just a second, what you're doing. If you are listening and you're an ally, continuing to educate yourself, staying in the conversation, being willing to be uncomfortable, and doing whatever you can do. We have work to do. We are not done, because you cannot legislate freedom, and you cannot legislate justice. You can't really. It has to come from the grassroots, the heart level out. So
That's right.
we have so much to do, and with that, Dr. David and all of his community, his beautiful, brilliant community, is doing a lot of good work. And tell us what's going on down there, David.
Well, we just first there's an article in the May issue of Science of Mind magazine. I'll hold it up again, not to be vain, but there it is.
Well,
Holy Uprising, and it's talking about just general concepts of what this moment in history is about, rising up in consciousness, and what that work really means. And then at the end of that article, there's a footnote that points to a piece of work that came out of our justice ministry here at Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta. And the work is called Recovery from the Lie of Whiteness. And it's a 12-step style recovery workbook. And I have a hard copy of it, so you see it's big. It's got questions and answer,
there you go.
There's the website, Lie of Whiteness. So you can see it's
Beautiful.
written, so that what we wanted to do was, there was the backstory here is, I was actually reading a wonderful book called The Conscious Activist by James O'Day. And while I was reading it, and this was last summer, and while I was reading it, something hit me. It was like, oh, the collective we, humanity, should be treating racism like the disease of consciousness that it is. And what if we took a 12-step approach to it? And so my mind started going and going, and I started scribbling notes about what the steps were. And 12 steps is not my native language. I'm not in another recovery program, but I have been, I've been in Al-Anon, and I've been through for people in my family and past relationships and whatnot. So I'm familiar enough with it. So I started going through the steps that to the degree that I remembered them, and writing, and I'm like, this would be a tremendous, valuable approach. And did a quick Google search, and then kind of had the wind taken out of my sail a little bit, because I don't know if you've ever had this experience about needing or wanting to write a book, and then you do a Google search and you find somebody else has written something very similar, right? If not the same thing. Right. So it turns out there was a group in Minnesota who had created what they called the 12 steps of recovery from white conditioning. And so I looked at those and I went, okay, well, here's a start. And we started working with that. And I got a group of people together to look at it and examine it, and how we could bring it into our justice work at the church. And as we were working with it, they had changed the language quite a bit, and I felt it had lost some power from the style in which the original 12 steps are written. And so there was a desire to kind of do more. And I had a wonderful member of our community, Reverend Andrea Travers, who's in California, who watches us online. She came forward, and she's done extensive work with 12 steps, and actually has written a wonderful body of work called the 12 Steps, 12 Wisdom Traditions. And it's about 12-step recovery as related to 12 of the world's religions, and relating it to each of those. And so she's done a lot of work with recovery for many, many years. So she came forward and she said, I want to help you, because I mentioned it in a sermon that we should be doing this. And she said, I want to help you. So so it's her name on the cover, because she's
I saw that. Yeah.
She's a project organizer. And then, and so her and I started talking, and she said, but David, you and I cannot do this alone. And she said, we're white. We can't be the sole authors of this. And I said, you're right. So I went to our practitioners and I said, anybody who's got a 12-step background, who is interested in helping us with this. And so we put together a group of people, practitioners of color from our community, and one person who was working with Andrea in California, and all of our names are in here, and bios are on the website, etc. And together, this group met every week for about 6 months, and when they went through each of the steps, and they created. Andrea's desire was to create a workbook style work where you could facilitate yourself through the steps, because often what's missing in 12-step work is that you've got the steps, but then it's like, well, but how do I do this? Right. And so that's what the work is. This workbook is for. It goes through each of the steps. It gives you some spiritual inspiration that I provide, and then Q&A that brings the perspective and the experience of people of color, their lived experience, their stories. They've written essays,
brilliant.
And so you can reflect, and then you can answer the questions that they answered, and you can see, how that compares. We're getting ready on our website to launch some guides for how to create a group. And really there's kind of 3 ways you can engage in the work. One, you could just buy the book and you could do it yourself and walk yourself through it. That's kind of what we wrote it for, so that you could do that. Second would be to either join or create a group, and go through it like you would a book study. And so we're publishing on our site right now the guides for that, so you can download a guide and it'll tell you how to do it, whether you want to do it virtually on a social media platform or something else, or in person. And then the third way would be the same as the second, but a little bit more rigid structure to it, and that would be to have a group that actually runs like a 12-step meeting. Your whole facilitation is very much the same way you would go if you're going to an NA or AA meeting. And so we'll have that out eventually as well. So 3 different ways to engage in the work. But
I just want to take a moment. I want to acknowledge Kathy Nash, who just put her thing. Kathy we did work, Healing the Divide work, and Kathy was there. And Kathy is just an ally extraordinaire. And I just want to call you out and say, Kathy, thank you for your good work. I follow you all the time on Facebook. You are doing the work. And even though you're right, David, the book couldn't be just white people. We know it is a white person's problem.
Right.
It is our problem. And so for that reason, I'm just so grateful for the people that I know that are allies and are on the ground doing the work, and continuing to do the work. So and Kathy, thank you for being here.
Yeah, and Kathy and I go way back. She's part of my community in Oregon, and
oh, okay.
Yeah, and participates with us online in Atlanta as well. And it is a white person's problem, but when somebody has asked me, well, who did you write this book for? We really wrote it for everybody, and we use the term lie of whiteness very strategically. We know that actually that may offend some people. It may, push some buttons and rub you the wrong way. And that's on purpose, right? We didn't we didn't want to mince words and make it too soft for people. We wanted to go right at it. In fact, because it's mentioned in the May issue of the Science of Mind, we've already had one person that I know of, and I wouldn't be surprised if there are others, but who wrote into the magazine and was so upset, not by the article that's in here, but by the footnote that mentions this work, that they canceled their subscription, and they wrote long, lengthy letter of how could you and blah, blah, blah. And
well, I recently got accused of shoving the Black Lives Matter subject down the throat of a group of people. And after the initial shock, I went, yes.
You're right.
Because we're not going to make a change without ruffling feathers.
That's right.
We're not going to do it. Kindness is a good thing, but kindness allows for a real shadow to stay in place. So, so sometimes people are not going to be happy.
Yeah, so they emailed me. They said, "Do you want to help us write a response?" I said, "Well, we could send a list of practitioners that they could call."
Maybe David's not the one to write the response.
Probably not have me on that list, but other practitioners, that they can call and pray with and examine their consciousness, because that's what it's about, right? What are the bedrock fundamentals of this teaching that we share in common? And it is our capacity, not just our capacity to acknowledge oneness and to see everything as manifestations of the one thing, but it is actually the capacity to examine consciousness and how consciousness works and what consciousness does. And if it's not producing the results that you want, if it's not producing results of harmony and wholeness and love and beauty and prosperity, whether that's in your life or our collective life, then here's how to change that, right? Here's what to do. Find the hidden belief, right? Eradicate it, replace it with something that is in relationship to the harmony and wholeness of your being, and work on that. And that's really what this workbook is about. And so the lie of whiteness affects everybody. It is a stew that we've all been cooked in for about 400 or 500 years, and it affects how people of color show up. There's a thing called performing to the expectations of whiteness. If we were to really go deep today, we would say that, in part, Barack Obama was elected because of his capacity to perform to the standards of whiteness, right? To such a degree that enough white women in particular said, yeah, I'll vote for him. Because he met the expectation of the standards of whiteness sets. Right. And that became problematic for him in the Black community, but also became an asset to the general electability. So whiteness affects all of us. And when we say whiteness, we're not talking about, necessarily white-hued people. Whiteness is a social construct, and it's one that was invented. James Baldwin is credited for first using the term lie of whiteness, and I have the quote here that where it comes from. So if I can, let me just say this real quick. He says, whiteness is a dangerous concept. It's not about skin color. It's not even about race. It's about the willful blindness used to justify white supremacy. It's about using moral rhetoric to defend exploitation, racism, mass murder, reigns of terror, and the crimes of empire. That's James Baldwin.
The thing that concerns me, and I wanted to say this earlier when we were talking about George Floyd, no one is required to like and or love everyone. That's not a requirement here. We're not required to like all music. We're not even required to like all neighbors. But this is so much bigger than that. Because in order to watch that video or to tolerate the level of racism, the level of suffering that has happened in this world, and when you look back at some of the history and you see the white people who stood around witnessing the lynchings, here's what had to happen. And Gary Zukav he spoke to this very clearly in his book, that beautiful book he wrote so many years ago, Seed of the Soul, that in order for me to witness that, I had to shut off and disconnect from my soul.
That's right.
I had to shut off. And so what concerns me is how we don't realize how the collective, and I don't mean to be really rude here, but I'm going to be, ignorance, how the ignorance don't realize that they've disconnected from that piece of them. And any justification is a sad sign that one has disconnected from their soul.
Yes.
Because in their soul moments, I refuse to believe that individual, and I'm not using his name much anymore on purpose, even in the blog I just wrote, because if he had been plugged into his soul, he couldn't have stayed doing what he did.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And we saw in the trial, we saw the manifestations of the lie, right? The lie of whiteness, because they are those moments of justification. Well, there were drugs in his body. Well, he was, this tall and weighed this much, and so he was out of control. Well, he was had a previous record. Well, all of these different things, right? And we have to stop ourselves when that kind of justification is going on and say, wait a second, right? Police officers do not have a license to murder you, even if you're guilty of something.
Right.
That's not their job. And, that's why I say justice would have been George being, the misdemeanor for using a counterfeit $20 bill. But the lie says, oh, but it's justified because this, that, and the other thing. No, it's not.
No,
right?
it's not.
And that's a lie that has been going on in this country for hundreds of years, right?
Yeah.
Where the police force comes from. It was the states putting together basically militias to capture escaped slaves.
Right.
So that's why we have to do this deconstructing work, and the lie is in all of us, because it's been a narrative in the background of media, our education, our training, our socialization for forever. And this is why I think the New Thought community is the perfect group of people to start this work and inspire this work to reach more, because we know how to deconstruct consciousness, right? Take something apart that's not working and replace it with something that does.
And yet I know, and I want to say this very gently and lovingly, New Thought community, you are perfectly positioned to be the head of the spear, but we each need to not be afraid of being nice. You can't think nice is the head of the spear.
Right.
Because sometimes you got to piss people off. I'm sorry to say it so coldly, but in order to drive that new idea, you have to cut through the lies, the veil of lies. And you can't do that with being nice.
That's right.
You just can't. It doesn't mean that you're not being in consciousness. And it doesn't mean that this beautiful metaphysical teaching we have is not still wonderful. It doesn't mean that when you're calling out something in the way that you are calling it out, David, it doesn't mean that you're not in principle. Because principle says oneness. And if oneness is true, then it's oneness for all. And any exception to that casts us into the world of duality.
Absolutely. So, I say in the May issue of Science Mind, I say that very thing about, this work will offend some. And that's okay, because, as we both have served as ministers in churches, and, if you and I are teaching a prosperity class and somebody gets offended the first night, because we're going to talk about, well, in this class for the next 6 weeks, we're going to practice tithing, right? And then what happens, right? You have 20 people in the class, and 5 of them walk out, and they
Yeah.
I can't believe this. And they're all upset, right? Well, do you
Right.
cancel the class?
No.
Do you never teach that class again? Do you avoid that
Right.
subject?
Right.
No,
Right.
you say this is what we're
Yeah.
teaching, and it's here and it's ready for those who are ready to do it, right? And if you're not ready, that's okay. It doesn't
Yeah.
change the truth of the principle. It just means you're not ready, and we still love you, but you're not ready. And
Right.
that's why I think the recovery lens is so important to this work, because you don't drag an alcoholic out of the bar to a meeting, right?
Right. That's
It
right.
doesn't work. You won't be effective. You can try, but
And
guess
face
what?
it, the
They'll go
12
right back.
step, yeah, and the 12-step model, I joke around sometimes, about how people wear it as a badge of honor now, where, 30 years ago, it wasn't. It
Right.
wasn't. So I'm so happy. So the 12-step model is again, too, I don't personally know it, but I know enough people who do, and they wear it as a badge of model. So it could be really the thing that opens the door. And I'm going to ask Diego to make sure that we put on the banner once again the website for this and for the book, because I want to make sure that people, thank you, that people know what it is or what to reach for. Yes, and it's about staying in the conversation, and that's what you're inviting us to do. David, you're inviting us to stay in that conversation.
And it's about the liberation of all of us. One of the points I make
Mm.
in the work is when I get free of the lie of whiteness, I get liberated too, right? I'm not just
Yeah.
liberating my consciousness from
Right.
the seeds of racism and supremacy that have been planted there. I also free myself, because I'm
Yeah.
not white, right? I'm actually, it turns out in my case, I'm 40% Scottish and about 40% English, and some other things.
I
But
don't know what white is actually when you think when
yeah,
you think about it.
and that's one of the things. So the website has a blog, and one of the blogs I explore that. It was about the Georgia voter law, the so-called election integrity law that was signed by Governor Kemp recently. And in that, I actually break down how the lie came to be, on this continent.
Mm-hmm.
And very quickly, how that was in colonial America, and particularly in Virginia, and maybe South Carolina. There's some places like that. Early colonial America, we're talking 1600s. Laws were written about marriage, about property rights, about
Right.
who could buy land, who could start a farm,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
how the government, how the colony might help you financially if you started a farm, and all of these different things, right? You did a homestead, and et cetera, et cetera. And in those laws, in the early versions of them, they would give those rights or those privileges to all free people. And then it was like, all Englishmen, all Christians. These were the identifiers that were used.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, what they discovered was that those identifiers weren't enough, because those identifiers didn't actually give the privilege and the power to exclusively who they intended to give
Right. Right.
privilege and power to. Because it turns out you could be black and you could get free. You could, in
Right. That's right.
some colonies, you could buy your freedom, or you could work off your service, or you could, whatever, there were free blacks, right? To be a Englishman, it said, right? Well, turns out, right, Europe had African Americans who were free, so you could come over and you could be a free black Englishman. So that didn't cut it. Christian,
Right.
well, that big mistake there, because we actually made all of the slaves become Christians. So now
Right.
they could
Right.
all raise their hand and say, yeah, I'm a Christian. So those
Right.
things didn't work. Because they wanted those particular privileges and protections to go to a certain group of people. And so they needed a different term that would work. And so they started using white. And when they started using white, they were like, oh, Now the group has actually sifted out to who it is that we want to have these privileges and powers.
Right, right.
So it was literally constructed. When I say it's a mental construct, that's what I mean. It was literally
Yeah.
constructed and then written into law. And then, and here's the kicker, right?
And it had everything to do with dollars and cents. I just want to say that
everything to do
straight.
with dollars and cents.
Everything.
And then other groups, light-hued ethnic groups, had to advocate, basically had to fight to become white, right? Because white,
Right, that's right.
white didn't mean Irish, it didn't mean German, it didn't mean Italian initially, right? Those groups had to fight to be included in the
Yes.
definition of whiteness over time. So when I say you're not white, I really mean it. It's like, this is about your own liberation, and it's about liberating ourselves from a consciousness of superiority and separation. That, again, step one, we say our collective life has become unmanageable. It's become unmanageable, right? It's become unmanageable.
I had I mentioned to you earlier, and I just want to, I had someone really speak out of turn in my own home yesterday. I was telling Dr. David, I'll tell you, and this person made a gross assumption that they could speak to me about the aftermath of the verdict and how those people were reacting in his town. And I looked at him wide-eyed, and I couldn't believe that this person made the assumption that he could speak that way to me in this house, in my house.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm mentioning that again because I consider myself a true active ally. And yet in my own home, I was dumbfounded.
Mm.
And I know there are people like me out there. I'm not the only one who kind of gets tongue-tied in the face of this kind of ignorance. So I want to ask you, what would you tell people like me? What would you tell people like me to do in those kind of instances?
Well, I mean, it's obviously very situational, but the dance between being very delicate but firm, I would just say, that doesn't fly in this house. I'd be like, yeah, it just, I don't know. Yeah, I would just say, there is no those people. Those people are us, and we are them. And in this house, we practice a language of oneness. If that doesn't work for you, then you can
Right.
get another contract for today. But in this house, while you're here,
Okay.
yeah. And I realize
It's funny because
delicate.
the gears in my head were turning. I'm like, but he was like really rambling, and I didn't know where to grab it. I'm looking in my mind like, what do I say? I've never had anybody make an assumption that they could speak to me in my home like this. Like, wait a minute, what about me says you can talk to me like that? And I thought, oh, I'm white. And you thought because I'm white, that was enough agreement. Mm-hmm. That's what happened there.
And probably you're a woman, right? That would be the other factor. I wonder if you would have said the same thing, or if you rebutted, because then you just said something, but then he kind of kept going, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I wonder if that would have happened if it was Neil, right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
But I'm going to tell you, every time something like that happens, it makes me realize I have to prepare for the next time. All of us.
Yes.
Because if I sit back and I quiet myself, I'm not doing the work. And I'm unwilling not to do the work. But I am willing to admit to you that I didn't know what to do in that moment. And I'm going to do a better job. I commit to doing a better job next time. I will be prepared.
Yeah.
So David, thank you. We're coming up to that time where we have filled up a beautiful amount of time. I am so happy to be in this Science of Mind movement. And thank you, Lori. I see you. Lori is another individual who is working with us in our community. We have a group calling Healing the Divide. And that's the work that we've been doing our anti-racism work under, and it's been beautiful.
Mhm.
Oh my God, it's moving and beautiful, beautiful work. Matter of fact, I'm going to have the leaders of that group on the show in a couple of weeks.
Wonderful.
But I thank you, and I'm glad to be your colleague and to be in this teaching together. And I just thank you. I thank you for the work. I thank you for standing up. I know that you were just recently on with Reverend Bishop Flunder, and adore that. I definitely have a girl crush on her, just because of how beautiful and brilliant and moving she is. And I actually sent her a little thing to ask her to be on the show, but it didn't happen this time. Maybe next time.
She'll get back to you. Yeah, she's
Yeah.
amazing. We're going to do some
She's-
more work specifically on this recovery workbook in a few months, actually. If I
Love
can,
to have you both on the show. Would love to have you do that.
let's do it. Yeah, let's find a way. Let me just say real quick about the book. If you're interested in it, there are 3 ways to get it. There's a PDF download that's available immediately. And so if you want PDF, and then you can print the pages or just look at it on your tablet or whatever it might be. If you want a hard copy, there's a link there for BookBaby, and BookBaby will ship it to you immediately. They have copies. Barnes & Noble and Amazon and any other places, the official release date is July 15th. So for those sites, it's a pre-order situation. You can order it, and then they'll it as soon as they get it in stock. We get, this is about mission, not about margin, but from a profit standpoint, we get more out of the BookBaby sales. However, we get more attention out of the Amazon sales.
Right.
Their advertising arm. So I'd encourage you to do the pre-order. And if you really want a copy and you want to start looking at it before then, do both if you can. It's only $14.
And buy a copy for everybody you care about.
Right, exactly. So because Amazon really pays attention to those pre-order things, and that'll determine what kind of attention they give it when it comes out.
Beautiful.
Etc. So I just wanted to make that clear. If you want it right away, you can do that. And the Amazon and Barnes & Noble, if you're not an Amazon person, I get it. I get my Barnes & Noble points as well. And Barnes & Noble, you can pick up Science Mind magazine as well. They have it on the news.
Right. So. David, what a gift you are.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
It's funny. I the other day, because I knew you were coming on the show, and I have this memory of you standing kind of timidly on the side of the hall in Asilomar. What was the small hall? The chapel. You were standing. You had come off of there, and you were standing on the side, and you were just kind of quiet and timid. It was many years ago. And that was my first awareness of this young but bold and light, this brilliant light. And so it has been, it's an honor to witness your becoming and your impact on the world. And I really thank you. I thank you for paving the way for the rest of us who sometimes need that light shower, the way shower.
My great
joy.
Joy.
Thank you. So everyone, thank you for being here again. I'm going to see if I can get David to come back with Bishop Flunder, because, the woman is just, oh my God, she's just amazing. And we'll keep the light on this subject and keep inviting you to join us and to grow and expand and to take as many people with you as you can. In the meantime, thank you for being here. Be well, be happy, and be brilliant. Love you. Thank you. Thank you, David.
New Thought Media Network is on the rise. We're looking to grow with you. Do you have technical media experience, or perhaps a desire to learn? Are you willing to volunteer your precious time and attention? We share this message to benefit all. If you possess a computer with a camera and a microphone, we will share our knowledge with you. behind the scenes, or being the star, let us bless our one. Contact us at info@ntmedia.org.